Physics promised to explain everything, but the more we learn, the more the reality slips between our fingers. Edwin Hubble. Paradox is the only ray of light capable of illuminating the truth. Sometimes a question is asked not to get an answer. Its purpose is to shake a person's confidence, to make them doubt the boundaries of perceived reality. These are not just riddles or linguistic puzzles, but a clash of pure logic with the universe that, nevertheless, withstands all attempts at resolution. This isn't about listing curious facts, but about a journey into science's deepest contradictions, into those areas where even the best ideas prove untenable. The reader will encounter time loops that close before they can open, civilizations that seemingly should be everywhere but remain invisible, and situations where observing an object changes its nature. Here, one can find cats simultaneously alive and dead, billiard balls colliding with themselves, and black holes capable of erasing history. Each concept begins simply, but when taken to its logical conclusion, a breakdown occurs, and that's where the real interest lies. If the reader finds beauty in the absence of answers and is willing to gaze intently into the unknown, then they are in the right place. The universe isn't neat, it's layered, unstable, and at times impossible, and perhaps that's its essence. The cosmos appears serene, yet it hides a question far from peaceful. Humanity inhabits a galaxy containing hundreds of billions of stars, most of which are older than our sun. Many of these stars are known to have planets, and a significant number of these planets could possess Earth-like conditions, warm enough for water, stable enough for life to emerge, and old enough for intelligent beings to develop. But where are they all? Scientists have listened carefully and patiently, using gigantic radio telescopes to scan the sky for decades, hoping to catch even a whisper, a signal, or any artificial sound. Yet, only silence has been detected, deep and constant, like a scream in a canyon that finds no echo. Perhaps this isn't because no one is there, but for some other reason. Statistics suggest that humanity should not be alone. The numbers indicate that intelligent life should have arisen repeatedly and in various places. Even by the most conservative estimates, there should be hundreds, possibly thousands of civilizations in our galaxy alone. And yet, so far, no confirmed signal or undeniable trace has been found, only stars in vast distances. This contradiction has a name, but it can be felt without knowing the term. It's the question that arises late at night when one looks out the window and realizes how vast the sky is. It challenges the belief that life naturally leads to technological development, that intelligence fosters communication, and that progress is guaranteed. Perhaps civilizations arise and disappear too quickly to be noticed. Perhaps they destroy themselves before they can venture beyond their home. Or perhaps they exist right now, quietly observing and choosing to remain invisible. There's another possibility, one that feels heavier. Perhaps humanity truly is the first. This idea changes everything, making humanity something fragile and rare. It means that humans aren't just looking for others, but carry within them something that might not exist anywhere else. A chance to speak when no one else has, and the responsibility not to disappear before they are heard. If this thought makes the stars seem colder and the silence heavier, that is perfectly natural. Since the sky has remained so quiet for so long, it ceases to appear merely empty and begins to feel intentional. Not long ago, Earth was considered the only planet with suitable conditions for life, a fragile blue dot orbiting a modest star, unique and solitary. However, this illusion has been shattered. Thanks to modern telescopes and sky surveys, we now know that galaxies are teeming with planets, numbering in the hundreds of billions, and among them, Earth-like worlds are not rare. On the contrary, they are common, they are not exceptional. They are found everywhere. Data from a mission called Kepler provided undeniable proof of this. Within the Milky Way galaxy, there could be over 300 million rocky planets orbiting stars similar to our Sun in what is known as the habitable zone. Not one or two, but hundreds of millions. Worlds with oceans, worlds bathed in sunlight, worlds where time flows relentlessly. Even if a tiny fraction of them gave rise to biological life, and an even smaller fraction produced intelligence, we should inevitably have noticed some signs, bright bursts of communication, subtle traces of machinery, artifacts indicating that someone else has been here. Yet, the celestial vault remains silent. And this isn't just poetic silence. It's a glaring contradiction, a mathematical paradox that shatters our usual sense of scale. For the cosmos is not merely vast, it is incredibly old. Some stars are billions of years older than our sun. This is more than enough time for life to evolve, civilizations to flourish, and to spread across star systems. If this has ever happened, even once, even in one place, why do we still see nothing? It feels like walking into a grand cathedral and realizing you are the only one breathing. The air, it would seem, should be filled with voices, echoes, footsteps. But instead, there is absolute emptiness. And the more one learns about how populated the universe should be, the more unnatural this silence seems. There are, of course, many theories attempting to explain this phenomenon. Perhaps intelligent life is short-lived. Perhaps it prefers to hide. Perhaps it is so sparse that we will never find each other. But each explanation raises new questions and doubts. Why does it feel like we're late to a party that never happened? If the thought of hundreds of millions of Earth-like planets remaining unanswered makes one's own existence feel more fragile, or conversely, more precious, then this is just the beginning of realizing how much we cannot explain. And if there are millions of worlds in the universe where life thrives, why is only our planet seemingly under close observation? Some mysteries arise not from a lack of information, but from an excess of logical reasoning that leads to a dead end. This is what happened in 1961, when an astronomer tried to put this intractable problem into a formula. The equation was not meant to provide a specific solution, but merely to list the main variables. How many stars form each year? How many of them have planets? How many of these planets are potentially suitable for sustaining life? Of those, on how many does life actually develop? How many life forms reach a level of intelligence? How many intelligent beings create technologies capable of being detected across interstellar distances? And how long can these civilizations last? By multiplying all these factors, one can get an approximate estimate, a number that indicates how many alien civilizations should currently be transmitting signals in our galaxy. And this is where the main problem arises. Regardless of how conservative the initial data, the result is typically not zero. The Drake equation suggests that we should be surrounded by extraterrestrial civilizations, that radio waves should be washing over us from all sides, and that space should be filled with whispers of encoded signals, pulses, patterns, and artificial echoes. But instead, we hear only silence, and so we return to this formula, trying to make sense of it. Perhaps we were too optimistic in our estimates. Perhaps life doesn't arise as easily as we think. Perhaps intelligent life is very rare. Perhaps technologically advanced civilizations are even rarer. Or perhaps it is the last factor, the longevity of a civilization, that is the stumbling block that nullifies all our calculations. How long can we last? There are two possible explanations for this cosmic silence. One is terrifying, the other is even worse. The first explanation presents the galaxy not as a barren wasteland, but as a place teeming with observers, vast and highly advanced civilizations scattered across star systems. But each of them prefers to hide, to listen, to wait, and to fear being discovered. And not because they suffer from paranoia, but because they have grasped a truth that is as yet unknown to us. This concept paints the universe as a dark forest, where each species is a hunter and each planet a potential refuge. The moment you reveal your presence, whether through a message, a light signal, or any other display of activity, you immediately become a target. For in a place where it's impossible to predict who or what might be lurking in the shadows, the most rational strategy is to remain silent. And woe to anyone who breaks that silence, making even the slightest sound. They will inevitably vanish. This could explain why we hear nothing. Perhaps other civilizations exist, but they choose not to make contact. They observe us, trying to understand if we are intelligent enough to be silent or foolish enough to dare to shout into the utter darkness. Imagine humanity's efforts directed into the void of space, like a desperate cry, hoping to be heard in the darkness. This theory is certainly grim, but unfortunately, it finds support in existing facts. The absence of any signals, the impossibility of making contact, only endless expanses dotted with stars, each one silent. But there is another, even more frightening assumption. Perhaps there is simply nothing beyond Earth. Not because someone or something is hiding, not because of potential danger, but simply because we are utterly alone in the universe. Imagine a boundless, silent ocean where there is no one but us. Not because it holds secrets, but because there are simply no other inhabitants in its depths. It's entirely possible that we are the pioneers who dared to venture this far, or even the only ones who ever invented a way to build a ship for this journey. Both of these theories can explain the prevailing silence, and both are deeply unsettling. If the galaxy is full of observers, then we are being watched, but if it is utterly empty, then we are the only ones left, the only witnesses, the last hope. An intelligent species that, should it fail, will leave nothing behind. This is why we continue to listen to the cosmic silence, trying to understand what kind of galaxy we live in, a forest full of hidden threats, or an ocean so vast that even the loudest cry cannot be heard. But this is just the tip of the iceberg. The most difficult questions have yet to be asked. And perhaps the most terrifying thing is not the silence of others, but that they never existed at all. In the past, humanity naively believed that Earth was the center of the universe. However, over time we learned that our planet orbits the Sun, which in turn is just one of countless stars. Our galaxy is just one of trillions existing in the universe. And despite this, we still hope that we are not alone. But the silence of space is gradually forcing us to reconsider our beliefs. It's not just that we haven't found traces of intelligent life yet. It's that we constantly find more and more reasons why we should have found it. An increasing number of potentially habitable planets, expanding temporal horizons, improving technologies, increasing the probability of alien intelligence. And yet, the universe remains silent. It emits no whisper, no murmur. It is absolutely and overwhelmingly mute. This evokes a strange feeling. Not fear, not even surprise. Rather, it's a cosmic loneliness, a sense that the immensity of the universe is real, and no one but us is observing it. However, perhaps silence is not a sign of emptiness. Perhaps it indicates fragility. If life in the universe is a rare phenomenon, then we may be the custodians of something priceless. If intelligence is fleeting, then we are just a transient spark in the darkness which can be extinguished as suddenly as it appeared. And if we truly are the first, then we are not just observers. We are participants in an experiment, the first voice to sound in the void. And this means we must ask not only where the others are, but what story we want to leave behind. What legacy are we creating or not creating for those who might one day find traces of our existence? Perhaps this is what makes the silence of space so heavy. It forces us to look in the mirror and see ourselves. We don't hear aliens because perhaps we need to hear ourselves, a warning, a chance, a responsibility. If the thought that we are the only conscious beings observing the cosmos makes you feel a little more insignificant, or conversely, more aware, then you are experiencing both awe and fear. For in a galaxy filled with noise, silence is the only sound no one expects. And sometimes, silence is the loudest answer of all. Time seems to be the most unshakable concept. It moves relentlessly forward, seconds following each other, days accumulating into weeks. Cause always precedes effect. However, beneath this apparent stability lies a strange anomaly. The possibility that time can not only move but also repeat cyclically. This is where the next mystery lies. Imagine a time loop, not as a metaphor, but as a reality. You extract an object from the future and bring it into the past, where this object becomes the cause of its own existence. There is no beginning, no creation, only an endless cycle with no starting point. A story that constantly tells itself. This is the basis of one of the most unsettling paradoxes in physics, which questions not only the limits of possibility, but also the very essence of being. Imagine you walk into a bookstore and buy a copy of Shakespeare's Hamlet. After some time, you build a time machine. For fun, you travel back in time to Shakespeare's London and give him the book. He reads it, likes it, puts his name on it, and centuries later, that very copy ends up in the same bookstore where you originally bought it. Imagine a book suddenly appearing on the shelf of a bookstore you happen to walk into. Who is its author? It didn't emerge from nothingness, nor was it brought from outside. This paradoxical phenomenon has a name, but the name doesn't make it any easier to understand. It is nothing less than a cycle where cause becomes effect, and effect in turn gives rise to cause. It is a piece of information or a material object that exists in time not by an act of creation, but simply because the time loop remains unbroken. While such a scenario seems like the product of a writer's imagination, general relativity does not rule out its possibility. The equations proposed by Albert Einstein allow for the existence of closed time-like curves, peculiar paths through space-time that loop back on themselves. Under certain conditions, it is theoretically possible to travel into one's own past and bring an object with you. This is not merely unusual, it is fraught with destabilization. For if time possesses such flexibility, if such loops truly exist, then nothing can be considered truly original, neither ideas nor inventions, nor even identity itself. If the laws of time permit such cyclic repetition, then reality appears not as a straight road, but rather as a spiral staircase. As we ascend it, we periodically find ourselves at the very same points, and this time, we have a book in our hands. If such a notion makes you perceive time not as the ticking of a clock, but as a trap, then the deeper we delve into this concept, the more time begins to spiral in on itself. And it is entirely possible that what we consider the beginning is, in fact, merely the middle of a time loop. You hand the book to William Shakespeare. He reads it, commits it to memory, and publishes it under his own name. Hamlet becomes a recognized masterpiece, passed down through generations, studied in schools, published, staged, and revered. Centuries later, you walk into a bookstore and pick up that very copy. You take it back in time. The loop closes. And in the end, no one is the true author of the work. This is the crux of the problem. It's not just about an object without an origin, but about information that sustains its own existence in time, never having been created. There was no flash of inspiration, no author holding a pen, no mind that conceived the words. The story simply exists because it has always existed, because its existence never ceased. And this violates something fundamental in our perception of the world. We build our understanding on the premise that everything has a source. Thoughts are born in minds, machines are created by inventors, music is composed by musicians. But in this time loop, the source vanishes. And yet, the object continues to exist. This makes one wonder what else might exist in such a way. A scientific formula, a technological blueprint, a piece of knowledge that arises in one person's mind and is transmitted to the past only to return to the future unchanged. A perfect closed circle, like a song without an author, playing endlessly on repeat. Modern physics does not reject this possibility. Einstein's theory of relativity does not forbid the existence of time loops. Moreover, some solutions to the equations, especially those involving extreme gravity or hypothetical objects like wormholes, allow for scenarios where past and future intersect. And this opens the door for self-created objects, self-initiating events, where cause and effect merge into a single continuous ribbon. But it also opens a prospect tinged with darker hues. What if we ourselves are part of such a loop? What if an idea, an element of our culture, a technology, or a belief didn't originate here and now, weren't generated by us? What if we are merely carrying a torch from a future that already knows of our deeds? If time allows for such loops, then invention becomes a memory, and history a rehearsal. If this makes you question the origin of the thoughts currently arising in your mind, then perhaps we are not moving forward, but in circles, around something we have seen before. And perhaps in this world, there are things that exist only because their existence never ceased. Imagine time as a sheet of paper, flat, linear, and blank. On it, you can draw a line from the past to the present and extended into the future, straight and meaningful. But what happens if this sheet is folded? What if 2 points that should be separated by years suddenly touch? This is what happens in a closed time-like loop. An object doesn't just travel through time, it transcends the timeline, bends it, and connects the end to the beginning. Like a crease in the universe, a fold that makes yesterday and tomorrow closest neighbors. And just like that, tomorrow, you are neighbors. Such a statement may seem rather abstract, yet it is precisely these scenarios that are allowed as quite probable in some solutions to Einstein's equations. In the immediate vicinity of rotating black holes, under certain conditions, or when passing through hypothetical wormholes, time does not necessarily have to flow in a strictly defined direction. It can quite cyclically repeat, like a scratched record. It can collapse in on itself, like a crumpled sheet of paper. In theory, it can be folded like intricate origami. And when such transformations of time occur, the most incredible things begin to make sense. Imagine you place an antique violin into a time machine and send it into the past. A brilliant composer who lived many years ago finds it, is inspired by its sound, and uses it to create immortal music that brings him worldwide fame. The violin is carefully preserved and passed down through generations until, one day, you discover it in a dusty attic, after which you send it back to the past. In this story, there is no original craftsman, no moment of creation, only a closed loop, a form perfectly folded in on itself. These time loops are self-consistent. They don't violate the course of events, but rather preserve it, provided that the events don't contradict each other. Such a loop can exist forever. No additional explanations are required here, as the loop itself is the explanation. However, beneath this apparent elegance lies something deeply strange. If time can indeed fold in this way, then what is memory? What is invention? And what, then, is the difference between discovering something new and receiving that very knowledge from a future you haven't yet lived? Perhaps this isn't science fiction at all. It's entirely possible that something you truly believe in, something you've read, thought about, or created with your own hands, isn't actually original. Perhaps you are just one fold on a sheet of paper, just one bend on a map, and this idea has come back to you again and again. This fundamentally changes our understanding of progress. Perhaps we don't create ideas, we merely receive them. Perhaps we are not inventors, but merely couriers, delivering messages from the past to the future and back again. And if time can indeed fold in this way, then on how many folds do we stand, without even realizing it? If this thought made you look at your own thoughts a little differently, then it's quite possible that what seems like a straight line is actually the edge of a spiral, because time doesn't always move forward. Sometimes it folds and gives you something it hasn't created yet. Some systems can collapse from an overload of information. If you've ever stood too close to a powerful speaker with a microphone in your hand, you've probably heard that piercing shriek, the howl of a feedback loop forming. The sound enters the microphone, is amplified, re-enters the speaker, and builds up until the system collapses under the weight of its own echo. Now imagine reality doing something similar. In certain models of time, events can form feedback loops, not because something repeats, but because the effect becomes its own cause. The future reaches back, feeds the past, and together they generate the present. This is not a story told in chronological order, it is, rather, a closed circuit. Imagine a physicist who receives the final form of a revolutionary equation from her future self. She studies it meticulously, understands its essence, publishes it, and ultimately becomes the very person who sends it back into the past. The knowledge exists. It brings immense benefit. But where did it come from? The loop feeds itself. No contradictions, no inconsistencies, just a pure recursive chain, a stable paradox. And such logic is taken quite seriously, especially in the world of quantum mechanics. Some researchers believe that information in our universe may not always flow in a straight line, that the past, present, and future can be intertwined with effects determined by future measurements. There are systems that become what they are only after they are observed, events that occur only if the timeline remains intact. This phenomenon is called post-selection, and it shatters everything we thought we knew about causality. These loops are not accidents, but rather constraints. Nature, some scientists believe, allows only those realities that perfectly fit together. Inconsistent stories are discarded. Universes that don't make logical sense, where paradoxes explode, never stabilize. Only self-consistent stories survive. This means that reality can edit itself in real time. You don't just experience the world moving forward. You are part of a loop that constantly checks whether your choices, your memories, and even your thoughts fit the bigger picture. And if they don't, the loop never forms. This version of you never existed. When the usual flow of time doesn't exist, something far more bizarre and mysterious than simple linear movement from past to future emerges. We are presented with a cosmos that lives by the laws of feedback, constantly reacting to its own changes, continuously analyzing and correcting itself, as if bending in on itself. In this picture, there is neither a starting point nor a final destination, but only an endless, self-sustaining system. If this concept has transformed the familiar arrow of time into a closed circle in your mind, then it's worth considering that reality, as we understand it, may not be so much a story with a beginning and an end, but rather a complex equation striving to solve itself. And if the universe listens to its own processes, then perhaps our existence here is necessary to complete this cosmic cycle. We are accustomed to perceiving the past as an unshakable foundation upon which everything else is built. It is considered primary and the cause of everything that happens in the present. But what if this notion isn't entirely accurate? What if the past is not only a starting point, but also a result of certain processes? This is not merely a figment of the imagination, but a very real and unsettling consequence of the laws of physics. In certain interpretations of quantum mechanics and even in ways of modeling space-time geometry, it is argued that the present is not only shaped by the past, but also constrained by what the future must become. Consider a quantum system, for example, a particle that can exist in multiple different states. Until the moment of measurement, it remains undefined and fuzzy. But here's the key. In some experiments, the outcome apparently depends not only on the initial setup of the system, but also on what we decide to do after the system has undergone changes. Future choices influence past behavior. This backward influence is not just a metaphor, it's embedded in the equations themselves. It seems as if the particle is not just waiting to be observed, but is anticipating its future to shape its history accordingly. And this phenomenon is not limited to quantum particles. Some physicists hypothesize that even macroscopic systems, such as our bodies, our decisions, and our entire history, may exist within a larger cycle of consistency. The past we remember is just one of many possible versions, the one that best fits the final outcome. In this concept, time is not a single river flowing steadily forward, but rather a complex web. The present is a knot held in place by threads pulled from both sides, and if you pull too hard on one of these threads, the entire structure begins to vibrate. The future doesn't just flow from the past, it shapes the path that is left behind. It's no wonder this idea causes discomfort, for it plunges us into a world where free will, memory, and even identity become conditional concepts, where our past wasn't fixed until the future brought it into focus. It also implies that the universe may not be moving towards some specific goal, but rather striving for a state of equilibrium, seeking a form in which each part harmonizes with the others. Cause and effect dissolve into the overall structure. If the past is only real because the future needs it to be, then who are we in the present? If all the above has made you look at your own timeline in a new way, then perhaps the greatest mystery of time is not where it goes, but how it determines what has already happened. And perhaps what we perceive as memory is merely an echo of what the future could not exist without. Imagine you build a time machine, get in, and set the year. You travel to the past, not to be a passive observer, but to act. And your goal is not to overthrow a king or a tyrant, but your own grandfather, not out of revenge, but merely to test how the rules work. For if you succeed in your endeavor, if your grandfather dies before your parent is born, then you will never be born either. And if you were never born, then you never got into the time machine. And if you didn't travel to the past, then your grandfather lives and you exist. And then you return to the past again, and the knife is once again in your hand. This is more than just a time loop. It's a contradiction woven into the very fabric of reality, an action that destroys the very possibility of that action, a wound that heals and reopens simultaneously. This phenomenon is known as the grandfather paradox, and it exists not only in works of fiction. It is one of the most serious threats to the very idea that time travel will ever become a reality. Because if the past can be altered in such a way that it leads to the destruction of the present, then the timeline becomes unstable, fragile, susceptible to glitches and self-destruction. And physics does not tolerate such things. The paradoxes that arise from attempts to change the past do not stand up to scrutiny. The physical laws of the universe resist such violations. Therefore, several scenarios unfold. The first is extremely simple. Time travel is impossible, and it's not just about violating logic, but about creating an unstable system, like a program that endlessly reboots. Reality itself becomes unable to function normally. But there is another, more subtle hypothesis. Some theories suggest that time has defense mechanisms. Regardless of the effort applied, the timeline is able to circumvent any actions. A weapon misfires, doubts arise. A random passerby intervenes. Something constantly prevents the past from being changed. And it's not about an all-seeing eye of the universe, but about consistency being its fundamental law. One can try to change the past, but in the end, only what has already happened will occur. And finally, the most improbable possibility. At the moment of intervention in the flow of time, the universe splits. The past remains unchanged, but a new reality is created. The world branches, forming a new timeline that develops without the time traveler's involvement. They are trapped in this new reality, a ghost from another story. Their original world continues to exist, remaining unchanged and unreachable. And the more one thinks about it, the more the weapon in one's hand feels alien. It's a test of reality's willingness to allow choices. If the thought of time resisting causes anxiety, then the rules are beginning to change. Some ideas lead not to a solution, but to a contradiction that is not merely confusing, but destructive. This happens when the killed grandfather problem reaches its logical conclusion. No matter how one tries to change the outcome, nothing works. Going back in time prevents the birth of the person who traveled through time, but if successful, the traveler themselves is erased. The action cancels itself out, forming a perfect loop of cancellation. A story that erases its author in the middle of the narrative is a nightmare for cause and effect. Unlike poetic paradoxes or theoretical musings, this paradox doesn't just loop, it explodes. Physics rejects it, logic doesn't accept it. And yet this possibility exists because time, in its elegance, allows for backward motion. But time, it seems, does not allow for contradictions. This is why many scientists propose some mechanism for correcting the narrative. Some call it self-consistency, others cosmic censorship. But the essence remains the same. Events can loop and repeat, but they cannot destroy each other. One can go back in time, but only to play a role in an already existing story. If you try to deviate from the script, the universe pushes you back. You can meet your grandfather, raise your hand, but something will always stop you. A coincidence, an accident, a failure. It doesn't have to be dramatic. It just needs to eliminate the contradiction. You cannot change the past. You can only become a part of it. In such a case, time travel becomes not control, but choreography. One can move freely, but only along predetermined lines. One cannot break history. One can only perform it. But if this is true, if paradoxes are impossible, then free will becomes ghostly. Choice can only exist if it is already inscribed in an unbroken loop. There is no risk of breaking time, because time already knows what will happen. And yet the contradiction remains. What if there is no correction, no resistance, but only a break? One too bold action, one moment that defies logic? What then would happen? Would time collapse? Would a new branch appear? Or would everything simply stop? If the thought of history collapsing under the weight of its own contradiction makes one doubt, then somewhere in these loops and breaks, a deeper pattern might be hidden. And perhaps the reason for the stability of the past is that it hasn't been broken yet. We are still holding on, but the limit is near. Behind every unexplained case lies a surprising assumption. The universe has certain immutable rules. It will not allow the existence of mutually exclusive statements. It is as if somewhere deep within this chaos, a corrector is at work, subtly removing impossible scenarios before they become widespread. Let's imagine time not as a linear sequence of events, but as a constantly updated set of rules. These rules apply not only to the laws of gravity and the speed of light, they also concern the stability of history itself. And when something arises that threatens to tear the fabric of the narrative apart, for example, a paradox, a logical contradiction, or the untimely demise of an ancestor, the flow of time rewrites itself. This happens not by magic, but by virtue of the constraints imposed on reality. In physics, this idea manifests as Novikov's self-consistency principle, which states that any event occurring within a time loop must be self-consistent. In other words, time may allow for the existence of loops, but it will not allow for the emergence of irresolvable contradictions. You have the opportunity to go back in time. You can interact with it, but you cannot change the already accomplished outcome. You merely bring it to life. It's not that you are not given freedom of action. It's just that your freedom is already inscribed in the past you are trying to alter. This resembles predestination. It's like being trapped inside a pre-written script. A character believes they are acting spontaneously, but in reality, they are repeating the same memorized lines over and over again. This principle has grim implications. It suggests that the past is not just resistant to change, it is immune to it. Try to break it, and you'll find the weapon misfires, you miss your target, or someone stops you. And this is not magic, but strict logic. For paradoxes cannot exist, and the universe has already accounted for your failure. But what if, instead of editing the course of time to avoid a paradox, the universe allows it to split? This is where the entire elegant structure collapses. Some hypotheses suggest that the inconsistency is not eliminated, but isolated. You create a new timeline, a parallel stream of reality, where your unthinkable action is indeed carried out. The original timeline remains untouched, but you are no longer in it. You are somewhere else, existing alone in a version of history that should never have happened, and there is no way back for you. Thus, either the timeline adjusts to your choice, or it breaks away from it. In both cases, something important is lost, namely, the dream of absolute freedom. If all the above has made you feel the past more like a locked door than a road that can be traveled back on, then the deeper we delve into this topic, the more time begins to feel like something alive, not just fluid, but possessing intelligence. And if the universe truly corrects itself to avoid paradox, then what happens when even this corrector makes a mistake? You take a step, a perfectly ordinary, uncommitted step. But what if that step, or the hesitation before it, splits the universe in two? One version of you continues moving, the other stops. And just like that, two timelines diverge forever. This isn't just a beautiful metaphor, not a literary device, but the real structure of the universe, vast, infinite, woven from decisions whose true importance we don't even suspect. This is the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics, and it doesn't just allow for the existence of alternative realities, it demands them. At the quantum level, elementary particles behave as potential possibilities. A photon doesn't fly left or right, it flies both ways simultaneously until it is observed. A particle isn't in a single point in space, it's as if it's smeared across many possible outcomes. But when you make a measurement, you see only one version, one reality, one specific outcome. So what happens to all the other options? The many worlds interpretation states that they also happen. Every outcome is real, every possibility is realized, but not here, somewhere else. And if this applies to elementary particles, then it applies to you. To every moment you stood before a choice, big or small, to every word you said or didn't say, to every person you met or passed by, somewhere out there exist all your versions. This is a terrifying freedom. Because now your life is not a straight line, it's an infinitely branching tree. Your regrets are real somewhere, as are your triumphs, as are your losses, as is the version of you that never came to be. Imagine a moment before your existence began. When you mentally return to the past to correct a mistake, save a life, or change a decision, you are not rewriting history but creating a new branch of reality. A split occurs, and you embark on a new path. The past remains untouched, but returning becomes impossible. This resolves the paradox of time travel. Even if you eliminate your ancestor in one reality, your original self, who traveled, still originates from a world where they survived. The contradiction disappears thanks to a workaround. However, the stakes are now higher because every action impacts not only the current reality, but all others as well. Every choice echoes in its own universe. And if this is true, then you have already created countless realities with thoughts you barely paid attention to, moments you barely remember. If realizing this fact makes you feel less like a character in a story and more like the author of a cosmic library, know that the choosing never stops. The tree of possibilities continues to grow. And somewhere, at this very moment, another version of you is wondering if the best choice was made. Imagine waking up with the feeling that something is wrong. The room seems the same, memories are intact, but you can't shake the sense that some decision, made perhaps years ago or even yesterday, led to undesirable consequences. This feeling, this unsettling shift, might just be a trick of the imagination, or it could be an echo from a neighboring reality, a version of you who chose a different path and is now living a life that is inaccessible to you. In the many worlds view of reality, you are not a single thread of consciousness. You are a node, an observer among an infinite number of versions of yourself. Each of you is moving along a separate branch of the quantum tree. And paradoxically, the version of you currently reading these lines may not be the original. The thing is, once the universe splits, all branches become equally real. No timeline possesses greater truth than the others. All unfold with equal probability. The only difference is that you remember this particular version of events. However, memory is not a reliable safeguard. In some interpretations, even your consciousness can undergo subtle, barely perceptible changes as reality branches. You may not notice these changes, feeling only the continuity of your own existence. Perhaps, somewhere deep inside you, there's an awareness that another version of you made a different choice and is now observing events from another branch of reality. Modern quantum computers are already using these concepts, performing calculations in superposition states and employing quantum entanglement to process multiple results simultaneously. This isn't magic, but rigorous physics. And it suggests that the mind may not be a closed system, but rather an extension, like a song played on harmonics that we cannot hear. Perhaps this explains the phenomenon of déjà vu, the nature of dreams. Perhaps we are constantly touching the boundaries of choices we didn't make. If this thought resonated within you, like a memory you never had, like the image of another version of you flickering in the darkness, then you are probably not the only version of yourself seeing this right now. For you didn't just choose a path, you became that path. Take an ordinary box and close it tightly. Inside, place a cat, a small sample of radioactive substance, a flask of poisonous gas, and a mechanism that will trigger if an atom decays. If the atom decays, the poison is released and the cat dies. If the atom remains stable, the cat survives. You don't check what's happening inside, you just wait. The question is, before you open the box, is the cat alive or dead? Logic suggests it must be in one of these states, but quantum mechanics asserts otherwise. In this situation, the atom is in a state of superposition. It is simultaneously decayed and not decayed. And since the cat's fate depends on the atom's state, it also finds itself in a strange intermediate state, simultaneously alive and dead. This will continue until you open the box and look inside. This is the essence of one of the most famous thought experiments in physics, and it's not about its cruelty, but about the deeply unsettling fact it reveals. Observation doesn't just record reality, it defines it. Until the moment of observation, the cat is in a quantum state of uncertainty, a fuzzy blend of both outcomes, alive and dead. Both possibilities exist simultaneously, but the moment you look, one of them becomes your reality, and the other disappears. In the intricate world of quantum mechanics, reality presents itself in all its paradoxical glory. Consider the famous thought experiment of Schrödinger's cat trapped in a box. Until an observer opens the box, the cat is simultaneously both alive and dead, existing in a state of superposition. But what happens when the box is opened? One possibility becomes reality, while the other vanishes. According to the many worlds interpretation, reality doesn't simply disappear without a trace. The moment the box is opened, the universe splits into two separate branches. In one, the observer sees a living cat, and in the other, its lifeless body. Both outcomes continue to exist, forming the structure of the multiverse. Somewhere, a version of the observer mourns the loss of their pet, while somewhere else, they experience relief at its survival. The observer themselves becomes a kind of dividing line, determining which of these realities becomes relevant to them. This principle applies not only to the cat in the box, but to every moment of uncertainty in life. Every coin toss, every choice at a crossroads, every wait for test results or an important call, these are all bifurcation points, potential points of divergence for realities. In our world, we see only one outcome, but others continue to unfold somewhere beyond our perception. Realizing this fact can make every unopened box in our lives heavier, as if the universe whispers from another reality, reminding us of unrealized possibilities. And perhaps the most terrifying thing is not whether the cat is alive or dead, but the realization that somewhere it exists in both states simultaneously. In quantum mechanics, moments of waiting are not just periods of uncertainty. They are moments of suspended animation where different outcomes coexist, at least until someone looks at the system. And here's the catch that still baffles scientists. The moment of observation doesn't just record the existing state of affairs, it completes it, collapsing the wave of probabilities into one specific fact. But what if the cause of this collapse isn't an external factor, but the observer's own consciousness? This idea, one of the most unsettling in quantum physics, suggests that the observer is not a passive spectator, but actively participates in shaping reality. The act of observation becomes a kind of trigger, determining what has been real all along. Some scientists call this the measurement problem, but that doesn't resolve the core issue. The equations of quantum mechanics clearly show that before measurement, particles have no definite characteristics. They exist in a state of superposition, representing a superposition of different possibilities. And only at the moment of observation does the system instantly transition into one specific state. It seems as if reality waits for the observer, not just out of politeness or patience, but on a fundamental level. This raises a question that many physicists try not to ask aloud. What is observation? Is it simply the recording of data by instruments, or does it require the presence of consciousness? If the answer involves consciousness, then the observer becomes a central link in the universe. They are not just a secondary character in the universe, but an active participant in its formation process. Every time an observer makes a choice, they may not be choosing from a multitude of options, but from a multitude of versions of reality that already exist. The other versions then fall away, like an echo that will never be heard. If this idea makes you perceive your own thoughts as tools, as instruments of creation, rather than merely means of observation, then the observer is not just looking at the world, they are shaping it. And perhaps, this is what the cat has been waiting for all this time. Not science, not fate, but simply the observer's gaze. Consider another astonishing phenomenon in quantum mechanics, quantum entanglement. Take two particles, create them together at the same moment in time under identical conditions, and then separate them. Send one particle to the left, the other to the right. The distance between them could be light years. Entire galaxies could lie between them. And yet, if you measure the state of one particle, the other responds instantly. This reaction occurs faster than the speed of light, ruling out the possibility of a signal being transmitted between the particles. Entanglement is perhaps the strangest phenomenon quantum mechanics has ever discovered. Once two particles are entangled, they begin to behave as a single system, regardless of the distance between them. Their properties are not just interrelated, they are inextricably intertwined. Changing the state of one particle instantly determines the state of the other. Albert Einstein vehemently disagreed with this concept, calling it spooky action at a distance. He believed there must be some hidden variable explaining this strange synchronicity. However, all experiments point to the contrary. Bell's theorem and numerous subsequent experiments have disproven the idea of hidden variables. The universe is indeed non-local, and this challenges our conventional understanding of space and time. Quantum entanglement represents the phenomenon of non-locality. Entangled particles exhibit behavior as if the distance between them doesn't matter, as if information doesn't need to be transmitted because it was never separated in the first place. Imagine, two particles, once a single entity, continue to interact as a unified whole, regardless of space and time. This is where the discomfort arises, because if particles can maintain a connection across the void, why couldn't this connection extend to more complex systems, specifically the human mind? What if every interaction, every touch, every moment of co-creation leaves behind an invisible yet palpable quantum entanglement? What if entanglement is not the exception, but the rule? In that case, space itself is perceived not as a barrier, but rather as a surface stretched between moments that were never truly separated. Humans are not alone and are never disconnected from others. Everyone is part of a web that is older than light. Modern physics shows us inexplicable phenomena. Perhaps the universe is connected not by force, not by mass, and not by charge, but by memory. Imagine you throw a book into a fire. The pages char, curl, and turn into smoke. However, the words, the meaning, the information do not disappear without a trace. In theory, if every molecule of ash and air were known, if the movement of every photon could be reversed, the book could be reconstructed. Such are the laws of physics. Energy is transformed, information is conserved, nothing disappears without a trace. However, this is not always the case. Imagine a black hole. You throw a book, a spaceship, a person into it. The event horizon swallows everything. No signals escape, no traces remain. An observer sees only that the black hole becomes slightly more massive and the space around it a little more distorted. This is where the horror lies. According to classical notions, information about an object, its location, history, and structure disappears, not just becoming inaccessible, but being destroyed. This is the black hole information paradox. According to quantum theory, information must be conserved. This is the foundation of everything, from the smallest particles to the scale of the cosmos. However, according to general relativity, black holes do not obey this law. They swallow information and hide it behind an invisible boundary from which nothing can escape. Which law is being violated? This question has sparked decades of debate. Some scientists argued that information disappears forever. Others believed it must leak out, encoded in the radiation that black holes emit as they evaporate. However, no one could provide convincing evidence. This is not just an astrophysical problem, it's a question about the limits of knowledge. If information can be destroyed, then meaning, memory, and identity itself can also be destroyed. What if there are places in the universe where laws cease to operate, where knowledge enters and disappears without a trace? Perhaps a black hole is not just an object, but a boundary, a limit to reality's ability to preserve its history. If this makes you wonder if everything that has ever been done could one day plunge into silence, then remember that at the edge of a black hole, even truth can slip away. And perhaps the most terrifying thing is not falling into the void, but realizing that no one will ever know that someone was there. A black hole evaporates slowly but inexorably. Over eons, it radiates energy in the form of faint heat emanating from its vicinity. This Hawking radiation, predicted decades ago and still unconfirmed experimentally, is unsettling. If true, black holes are not eternal. They fade and eventually vanish without a trace. There is no explosion, no trace whatsoever, just a faint ripple in space-time, and then nothing. And therein lies the deepest fear. If everything that fell into a black hole, light, matter, thought, structure, is gone, then the universe has lost something it can never get back. A page has been torn from the cosmic book and burned. Imagine a cosmic library where instead of books, there are entire galaxies, and instead of pages, the laws of physics. And then, someone burns one of these books, destroying invaluable knowledge. This isn't just about the interaction of stars and gravitational fields. It's about a fundamental principle of physics known as unitarity. This principle states that information about the past of any system in the universe never disappears without a trace. It merely transforms, changes its form. Mathematical equations persistently demand this, yet black holes seem to ignore this rule. The process of a black hole evaporating appears unnaturally clean and sterile, as if the universe itself is gradually losing its memories of the past. And if a vast number of such black holes cease to exist, what will the cosmos become? It will turn into a place filled with eerie silence. There will be no structure, no records, not even the slightest imprint of what once existed. Not even a shadow of the past will remain. The black hole information paradox is not just an unsolved problem in physics. It's a question of self-identity. If the universe can lose information, can it not also lose us? There are various theories attempting to resolve this paradox. Some suggest that information is preserved on the black hole's event horizon, like a hologram. Others argue that it dissipates into radiation as the black hole evaporates. Still others believe it is hidden in correlations so faint they are undetectable. But there is no definitive answer yet. Perhaps we will never know it, because this is where science confronts something more mysterious and profound. Imagine that reality itself cannot remember absolutely everything, that some stories, entire galaxies, and lives can vanish without a trace into silence, leaving no echo, no mark, no way back. This transforms the question of survival into a question of legacy. What will we leave behind if even the universe forgets our existence? If this thought made you feel the full scale of what we risk and who we could become, then know that some paradoxes are not just puzzles, but true tragedies. And perhaps the end of the universe will come not by fire or ice, but by oblivion. Once we believed that knowing absolutely everything was possible, that the universe, however strange and vast, would eventually reveal all its secrets, that science, given enough time and the necessary tools, could explain absolutely everything. But what if this belief is just another illusion? What if there are places in reality that we are never destined to reach, not because they are well hidden, but because they are unknowable? Every paradox we encounter, time loops, the disappearance of information, superposition, collapse, hints at one cruel truth. Our minds evolved under the influence of the need to survive and make sense of everyday things, not the infinite. We are built to find patterns in birdsong and facial expressions, not to decipher 12-dimensional Hilbert spaces, not to intuitively understand a universe where one event gives rise to two timelines, or where cause and effect can flow in both directions. So we try. We build models, we run simulations, but we still only see shadows on the walls of the cave. Reality remains hidden behind a curtain, and every time we try to peek behind it, the bright light burns our eyes. What if the reason these contradictions don't disappear, why time loops, disappearances, and impossible solutions continue to arise, is that we are trying to impose logic on something that was never logical to begin with? Perhaps the problem isn't with the universe, but with our perception. There's something unsettling in this thought, and it's not just that there's much we don't know, but that we may never be able to know it. That our questions hit not a wall of science, but a wall of reason. That reality is too vast, too recursive, and too alien for a mind programmed for beginnings, middles, and ends. And yet, we continue to ask questions. Perhaps this is the most human thing about us. Not intelligence, not memory, but the willingness to face a problem that defies solution and to keep searching for an answer. So if your mind feels tired but strangely awake, as if it has just encountered something incomprehensibly vast, then remember that this series won't give you ready answers. It will only allow you to gaze at the boundary between understanding and mystery and feel the eerie possibility that beyond that boundary, there is only silence. What if we're not late? What if we're too early? We often imagine ourselves as newcomers to a galaxy already teeming with ancient civilizations. In such a case, the silence becomes ominous, suspicious, and mysterious, demanding an immediate solution. But what if there's no one to solve this riddle? Not because all civilizations are hiding, but because they never existed. In this version of the universe, we are not just curious. We are alone. And this loneliness is not accidental, but connected to our place in time. Perhaps our spark of self-awareness is the first to ever emerge from cosmic dust. Perhaps we are the first to look within ourselves and ask, what am I? The realization of one's own essence and reflections on the nature of one's existence fundamentally change our perception of the world. We cease to be mere observers and become starting points, the first voices sounding in the silent cathedral of the universe, the pioneers of thought. It was our hands that created mechanisms capable of dreaming. With this realization comes immense responsibility. If we truly are the first, then every action we take acquires immeasurable significance. We are not just determining our future, but also shaping the very idea of what intelligence can be. Our success or failure becomes a prologue for all consciousness that may arise in the future, or the final chapter in a story with no continuation. The silence of the universe ceases to seem ominous. It becomes sacred, not a warning, but an invitation into a boundless, untouched space awaiting its first story. But what will that story be? Will it be the tale of a species that builds, forgetting its original purpose, or the story of those who learn, adapt, strive for knowledge, and share their discoveries? If ever, looking at the night sky, you felt infinitesimally small and now feel enormous, yet simultaneously afraid, then perhaps we stand on the threshold of something entirely new. And the first intelligence to awaken in the void has the power to shape everything that follows. All these scientific theories, paradoxes, and the immensity of the universe ultimately boil down to something personal, to you, to the fragile mortal body sitting before the screen, listening and wondering. For behind every theory, behind every telescope, and behind every machine lies a mind striving to escape something: death. We rarely admit it, but our insatiable thirst for knowledge, our obsession with time, and our need to leave a mark all point in one direction. We are the only beings, as far as we know, who are fully aware of our mortality and unwilling to accept it. So we create alternate timelines, ponder the possibility of consciousness uploading, and ask if the soul can travel through space and time. We want to know if intelligence, once it arises, can ever truly disappear. And this is where it gets interesting. The very physics that claims particles can be linked across a galaxy, that time can loop, and that information can vanish into silence, leaves room, albeit ever so slightly, for something beyond finiteness. Perhaps death, like a measurement, is not an end, but merely a change of state. Some scientists and thinkers suggest that consciousness might be a pattern that, when copied or transmitted, can persist. Others envision minds functioning in simulations, a digital afterlife created from code and memory, an eternal sleep not bound to cells. There are also more modest theories suggesting that perhaps the afterlife is reality itself. Perhaps the very fact of your existence in consciousness means that you will always exist, not in this body, but somewhere else. This is not proof or comfort, but it is not complete nothingness either, because physics does not rule it out, and the mystery remains unsolved. If these reflections made you feel the weight of your own breath in the transience of existence, then science may not grant us eternity, but it provides the tools to question whether eternity was ours to begin with. And perhaps the pursuit of immortality is not an escape from death, but a recognition of life's value. The universe is expanding. Every second, galaxies recede from each other. Space itself is relentlessly stretching. And as it does, The stars dim, the sky empties, and the night grows colder. This won't happen tomorrow or in a million years, but someday the light will go out. The last stars will burn out, the last black holes will evaporate, matter will decay. And what will remain will not be silence, but absolute stillness. No heat, no motion, no thought, only cold. This is the long-term perspective, the heat death of the universe, a future in which entropy triumphs, in which everything useful, everything structured, and everything alive dissolves. But a paradox arises. If everything ends in nothing, then why did anything begin at all? Why emerge from this stillness only to return to it? Why create consciousness only to watch it disappear? Why spend billions of years creating stars, molecules, and minds for a story that ends with a blank page? What will happen when the end of time comes and only a silent, empty page remains? Some hold the view that the universe doesn't care about this at all. It has no predetermined purpose, no meticulously crafted plan. It simply exists, and that's it. Other people wonder if this all-consuming echo, this absolute stillness, is part of something much larger and grander. Perhaps entropy is not the ultimate death of everything, but a necessary reset, like a spring compressing before a new, even more powerful start, a deep breath before another big bang. Or perhaps it's just the final round, and the echo we clearly hear doesn't come from the end of time at all. It comes from ourselves, from our endless questions, unfulfilled hopes, desperate attempts to ascribe some meaning to a complex system that never asked to be understood. Perhaps this ominous echo doesn't come from the very edge of time, but from our deep inner need to feel significant in this vast universe, which continues to silently whisper in response, "You are merely temporary guests in this world," and yet we continue to listen tirelessly. If you have ever looked at the night sky and felt it looking back, not cold and cruel, but simply indifferent, then you understand that sometimes science cannot provide an exhaustive answer. It becomes a question itself, requiring detailed study. And perhaps this echo at the end of time is merely a reverberation of something that once dared to care. We've talked a lot about black holes and mysterious time loops, about the existence of multiverses and the irreversible loss of information, about Schrödinger's famous cat, simultaneously alive and dead, about observers shaping reality with the power of their minds, and about machines that learn to think on their own. But behind all this, behind every paradoxical contradiction, behind every unsolved mystery, something quietly and intently has been watching you. Not as an impartial bystander, not as an omniscient narrator, but as the embodied paradox itself. Because here you are, self-aware, wondering about everything around you, temporal yet infinite, a being made of stardust, asking questions that no stone has ever pondered. You carry within you atoms that traveled from distant stars, long dead before our Earth was born. You think in a language that originated from primitive grunts and the light of ancient fire. You imagine your inevitable end, and yet continue to live against all odds. It simply shouldn't be possible. You are made of parts that care nothing for you. Blind molecules, brainless energy, systems that blindly follow rules, not their dreams. And yet somehow, from all this chaos you came into being, not just breathing, but consciously thinking. And here lies the cruel miracle. No matter how far science advances, how many dimensions we discover, how many timelines we map, how many equations we balance, the least we understand is the one asking all these questions. What are you? A complex signal transmitted through an entangled nervous system, a fleeting flash of organized matter, an annoying glitch in a well-oiled biological system? Or are you the universe's long-awaited answer to its own silence? We will probably never know for sure, because every answer received folds back on itself, forming an endless loop. Every path chosen circles back, every truth discovered turns into a funhouse mirror. You are not outside the mystery, but deep within it. And perhaps it was all meant to be this way, not to resolve all existing paradoxes once and for all, but for you to realize that you yourself are one of them. A mind that cannot explain itself, a being aware of its inevitable disappearance, a voice echoing in a vast universe that may never answer. And yet you don't stop asking questions. If this thought made you freeze in place, not from inexplicable fear, but from overwhelming wonder, then continue to listen carefully. Because perhaps the last paradox is not out there, in distant space or lost time. Perhaps it is right here, in the present moment, the incomprehensible possibility of your existence, and this is where this exciting story ends, or perhaps where it only begins.